Here's a 2012 Range Rover Evoque with a common turbo issue. So we're going to go ahead and remove the engine cover, intake pipe, strut crossbar, and the cowl cover and wiper blades. 7mm socket. $10mm. 7mm hose clamp here, right here. And there's a hose right here. You're going to want to pinch the sides and pull, release. 10mm bolt head right here. Take a Phillips and take off the air box. And we'll take all this all out at the same time. Red clip here, pull out, push down on the black piece, pop out. Next is 12mm engine cover stud. So we'll go ahead and take off this crossbar here. There's two 13mm head bolts here and two on the passenger side. There's a little plastic pop rivet on the sides. Just put your Phillips in here, unscrew it, unthread it, and just pop it right out. And there's 1, 2, 3 more in the center. Take the caps off for the windshield wiper arms. Take a 15mm socket. Grab the arm here, and then right at the pivot point, when you go to take these wiper arms off, grab the arm so it doesn't hit the glass. Fingers underneath, and just grab it and push down. It'll break loose. It'll pop right out. Now we'll take this cowl cover off. Just be very careful with where the seams line up with the glass. Could possibly damage the windshield. So in taking these off, there's a little Phillips head screw right there that holds in the A-pillar trim. Just take that off, give you a little bit more room to work with. If you can, once you take that screw off, pop the trim out of the way and you'll get it started just like this. And you take it off the whole way. So now once that's off, we just need to take off this firewall. Just a couple bolts. And then we'll remove this sound symposer. Maybe go ahead and take that off. Move some of these wires, remove the ECU just from the mount. We're not going to unplug anything, and just move it out of the way. And then we'll have full access to the turbo and manifold. I'm going to go ahead and remove the battery cover, and then we'll be able to access the release to take this hose off. Four 8mm bolts to remove the battery tray. Pay attention when you take that battery tray off. It gets slid down into this piece. This is going to take the ECU out along with the holder. Oh, it's going to give us more room when we come to take the turbo out from the top. So just take those two 10mm out. And then next we'll take this little tray out. So once you have that removed and that water cover removed, there's an 8mm bolt right here. So take that out. And then we'll be able to take all these wires out of the way and then get this horn out of the way. We'll take all this out. Just be careful, there's a little clip on the underside here. And then you'll take the vacuum line off, just slide it out. And then I usually just move it out of the way, just like that. Now we're going to take this hose clamp off. And then down here is where you detach it. See these little nubs on the side? Just pinch those and slide this up out of the way. So if you have a pair of hose clamp pliers, use them. If not, go buy yourself a pair because they are what you need. Take that off. If it doesn't come loose, or a pair of pliers, grab it at the hose. So now that that's out of the way, we can go ahead and take off the rest of this firewall, and this will all be open for us. See those two ears right there? You just pinch those together and it will release the locks right here on that unit, and it slides right up. So I'll go ahead and take off this bolt, the one down here. So there's a bolt up here, one down there, and then these two over here, and then just you're going to want to watch for this area here, because that's where the heater hoses for the coolant go. And then now we have all this access to the turbo. First thing we're going to want to do is take off the hose clamp for this hose down below here, 7mm hose clamp, so just take that off. So I said this line here was a vacuum line. I forgot it's actually a coolant line going to the turbo. So when you take it off, try to get a plug or something where you can just plug the line so it doesn't continue to leak coolant. Heat shield, there's a couple lines there, and then intake hose is off, heat shield bolts are off, coolant hose is disconnected. So now we'll take the heat shield off and take some of the vacuum lines off the turbo. When we take the heat shield off, just check out the you know, the inside of it. And also if you look down at the exhaust, we'll leave the turbo or the exhaust manifold mounted right now. We'll take some of the vacuum lines off. We're going to take the oil lines off, and then we'll take that intake hose off, the red or orange boot right there. And then we'll take the 3 bolts off. We don't have to take all of them off. I forget which ones exactly we don't need to take off. And then there's a bolt right here. Right there. We'll take that one off. But we'll leave the manifold on just to kind of help us, because if we take it off, we'll lose some of the torque when we go to take some of these lines off. So that'll be the last thing we take off. And what I normally do is try to take all the studs out, because when the studs come off, we can slide the manifold straight up instead of out and up. It just gives us a little bit more room to work with taking the manifold studs out. We took off one of the coolant lines. This is the side of the turbo. What I did, instead of taking the whole wheel panel off, there's a 10mm plastic nut here and here, and I just took this and just folded it out of the way. You're going to take this oil pressure line off. It takes a 17mm socket, so take that off. And then here's one of the vacuum lines you're going to want to take off. Take both of those off. Also, here's the boost solenoid, so unplug it, take that oil return line off, and I'll show you how I do it, and you kind of get it out of the way without having to take it completely off. Alright, so I have the turbo out now, one piece with the exhaust manifold. I took out all the studs. Here's the holes for the catalytic converter to bolt to the back of the turbo. There's a seal in here you're going to want to replace. This is the oil drain line. I unbolted it from this side rather than this side because it's pretty hard to get to. So just when you do it, I just like to take it off from here. Just don't move it too much because you could break this the metal, you know, if you wear it too much. And then this is with a 10mm Allen, one of the coolant lines. This will transfer over to the new turbo. I just connect it here from the side. Be very careful putting this back into the car. Could cross thread the threads and strip it out and you're screwed. And I'll transfer this over. The intake boot, I unclamp it on this side and then just pull it straight out. So when you put this back in, pay attention to you know, getting this on the pressure pipe. This is what it looks like out of the car. Just remember to take off that bolt right there. That will allow you to have enough room to just slide the cat out of the way. You only need just a little bit because it just slides right up. And as long as you take all the exhaust studs out, it literally just slides right out. Right here, I found, you can see it's cracked. And this one too. All right, we have everything swapped over to the new turbo. New washers, gasket, vacuum lines are all swapped over. Boost hose. One thing it's recommended is oil screen for the oil pressure line going to the turbo. It goes inside that hole there. So the old one, you're going to want to use some kind of pick. So here's the new one, and just put it right in here, just like that. All right, so when we go to put in the new turbo, the main focus is going to be getting the boost hose around this piece here, because it's just a lot easier to do it that way. I took off that nut, but you don't really need to take it off. And then just take your time, watch the coolant line, just be careful with that. Just take your time. As long as you have your exhaust studs off, it gives you a lot more room to work with. Focus on getting the intake hose on this piece, and then also pay attention to the oil return line. Make sure the gasket doesn't come off as you set it down to get it in place. So just hold it up, reach your left hand down in there, just guide that hose on there, pulls right in. Now it gives us a little bit more room to work with, and just make sure that gasket's still on the oil return line, just because it's pretty hard to get to when everything's mounted to the engine. When you get the manifold in place, I just put a stud in this corner with a bolt just to hold it so it doesn't move. Now we'll just go ahead and put in all the coolant and oil lines. The hardest one is probably the oil pressure line, the one that's down on this side. Just be very, very careful not to cross thread it. What I normally do is leave the line loose here on this side. That way you have a little bit of room to work with. And once you get started with it, get a little tight, and then just tighten this side on the turbo. Put in the oil return line, and then after that it should be pretty straightforward from there. Here's a little tip for you guys. If you're trying to reach somewhere where you can't get your fingers or hands, take the bolt you're using, put it against some plastic, sandwich it between, put it in the socket, hold the put a little plastic in there. Now you have a little wedge to be able to you can guide it through to where you're going. This is what I'm using to get the oil drain mounted to the engine. So I ended up taking the hose off to get to the oil return line. It was just easier that way. The hose back on, 13mm nut back on, all the other lines back on, like the oil pressure line, coolant hose. Mounted up exhaust housing of the turbo, bolting down the manifold to the cylinder head. All right, so once you get the exhaust manifold all mounted up, it helps you. I'll help align the cat to the exhaust outlet on the turbo. Bolt the cat to the turbo, and then finish up putting this coolant line back on. And then don't forget that bolt down there. Start putting the heat shield back on. All right, so the heat shield's on the turbo. One thing I ran into, this turbo the customer got it from, I think it's Turbo Parts Canada. They make these aftermarket turbos, replacement turbos for these Evoques. The intake seems like it's off a little bit. I had to remove a bracket, and this isn't mounting 100% the way it should. So that's one thing to keep note of. When we removed it, we kept this on, but I ended up taking this off to get it in place. So just take this one off and then slide it in. You're gonna have to force it a little bit. So then just put the heat shield on, just be patient with it. There's tabs in the back. Just make sure, just take your time with it. Pay attention to this grommet down here. And then just put all the bolts back in, tighten that up. Go ahead and put all the battery stuff and ECU and all that stuff back together, along with the brackets that we removed back here. So we have this bracket mounted, ECU back in, all this is back together. Just slide this piece in first, put in this vacuum line. Next is the ECU harness. Put this piece back on, battery tray in, battery. I ended up taking this negative out just so I can get the whole harness out of the way. Air filter, air box, tighten this. We didn't have to remove it, so if you did loosen it, just tighten it. Tighten this one, tighten this, put this hose back on. So now we'll put the cowl panel back over, wiper arms, check oil level, coolant level. All right, so we have cowl back on, bar, wipe the blade. You know, just make sure, top off the coolant level, check your oil level. And, you know, obviously when the car's running, check underneath in case you have any oil or coolant leaks. You know, go give it a drive, see how it works.